You don't look like a CEO.
The moment Marcus walked into that boardroom, he knew something was wrong. 23 years of building his empire, and the first words out of her mouth were, "You don't look like a CEO." What happened next will make your blood boil, and then restore your faith in justice. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor, each drop like a drumbeat against the glass. Inside the pristine boardroom of Hartwell and Associates, the scent of fresh coffee mixed with expensive cologne hung in the air. The mahogany table reflected the city lights below, and leather chairs worth more than most people's cars surrounded it like thrones. Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his navy blazer one final time before stepping through the heavy oak doors. At 38, he moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had built something from nothing. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his shoes polished to a mirror shine, and his presentation folder tucked securely under his arm. But as he entered the room, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. 7 pairs of eyes turned toward him, and Marcus felt the familiar weight of judgment pressing down on his shoulders. He'd felt it countless times before, in bank lobbies, at networking events, in rooms just like this one. The way people's expressions shifted when they realized he wasn't there to serve coffee or fix the printer. "Gentlemen and lady," Marcus said, his voice steady as he approached the head of the table, "thank you for taking the time to meet with me today." The senior partners of Hartwell and Associates sat like statues around the polished table. These were the gatekeepers of the city's most prestigious investment deals, the people who could make or break a company with a single phone call. At the far end sat Victoria Hartwell, the firm's founding partner. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her steel-gray eyes studied Marcus with the intensity of a hawk sizing up prey. She was known throughout the financial district as brilliant, ruthless, and utterly intolerant of what she called amateur hour. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said, her voice crisp as winter air, "we've reviewed your proposal for the TechFlow acquisition. Ambitious, I'll give you that." Marcus nodded, setting his presentation materials on the table. "Thank you, Ms. Hartwell. I believe TechFlow represents exactly the kind of innovative disruption your portfolio needs." A few of the partners exchanged glances. One of them, a balding man with thick glasses, suppressed what might have been a smirk. "Before we begin," Victoria continued, her fingers drumming against the table, "I have to ask." She paused, her eyes scanning Marcus from head to toe. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This is a senior-level strategic meeting." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the air conditioning and the rain still pattering against the windows. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. "I'm exactly where I need to be," he replied calmly. Victoria leaned back in her chair, a thin smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "It's just that, well, you don't look like a CEO." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Around the table, the other partners shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One cleared his throat. Another suddenly found his smartphone incredibly interesting. Marcus stood perfectly still, his hands at his sides. 23 years of memories flashed through his mind in an instant. His mother working 3 jobs to keep their small apartment, the guidance counselor who told him to be realistic about his college dreams, the first investor who laughed him out of the room, the second, the third. "You don't look like a CEO." How many times had he heard variations of those words? How many times had people seen his face, his skin, his name, and decided they knew exactly what he was capable of? But this time was different. This time he wasn't a 20-year-old kid with a dream and empty pockets. This time he had something to say. Marcus took a deep breath, the scent of coffee and rain filling his nostrils. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried the weight of thunder. "You're absolutely right, Ms. Hartwell. I don't look like a CEO." The partners exchanged confused glances. Where was the anger, the defensiveness, the stammering apology they were expecting? Marcus continued, his dark eyes never leaving Victoria's face. "I don't look like the CEOs you're used to seeing in this room. I don't have the right pedigree, the right connections, or the right last name. My father didn't graduate from Harvard Business School. My mother didn't summer in the Hamptons." He paused, letting his words sink in. The rain outside seemed to intensify, as if the storm was building to match the electricity in the room. Marcus asked, "What do I look like?" his voice growing stronger with each word. "I look like the CEO who started with nothing but a laptop and a dream in his studio apartment. I look like the CEO who worked 18-hour days while his friends were out partying. I look like the CEO who was rejected by 47 investors before finding the 48th who believed in him." One of the younger partners, a man who had been checking his phone moments earlier, was now staring at Marcus with wide eyes. "I look like the CEO who bootstrapped his first company to 30 million in revenue before selling it to Google for 400 million. Victoria's confident smile was beginning to waver. Her fingers had stopped drumming against the table. "I look like the CEO who didn't inherit his wealth or his opportunities. I look like the CEO who had to earn every single thing he has ever achieved. And most importantly," he leaned forward, his hands planted firmly on the mahogany table, "I look like the CEO who remembers what it feels like to be underestimated." The silence in the room was deafening. Even the rain outside seemed to have paused, as if the nature itself was holding its breath. Marcus straightened up, his voice now carrying the full weight of his conviction. "You want to know what TechFlow is really worth? It's not just about the numbers in my presentation. It's about understanding that the future belongs to the companies that don't look like the companies of the past." He opened his presentation folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. TechFlow's user base is 68% diverse: women, minorities, first-generation college graduates, and immigrants. The exact people who don't look like traditional executives. And they're driving 73% of all new technology adoption. Victoria's eyes widened as she read the numbers. Around the table, the other partners were leaning forward, their earlier dismissiveness replaced by genuine attention. While you've been investing in companies that look familiar, TechFlow has been building the infrastructure for the economy of tomorrow. Their AI-powered platform doesn't just serve customers, it understands them, because it was built by people who had to understand what it means to be overlooked. He pulled out another document. Last quarter, TechFlow generated 42 million in revenue. This quarter, they're projected to hit 68 million. Next quarter, we're looking at breaking 100 million. The balding man with glasses was frantically taking notes. Another was already reaching for his phone, probably to run some quick calculations.
"But here's the thing," Marcus said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "TechFlow isn't just a company, it's a movement. It's proof that when you invest in people who don't look like the traditional power structure, you don't just get good returns, you get revolutionary returns." Victoria set down the papers, her steel-gray eyes now studying Marcus with a different kind of intensity. "These numbers, they're verified?" "Every single one," Marcus replied, "audited by 3 independent firms. I can have the full documentation to you within the hour." The energy in the room had completely transformed. What started as a dismissive interrogation had become something else entirely. A masterclass in leadership, vision, and the power of authentic conviction. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed it to the table. "This is a text I received this morning from Sarah Chen, TechFlow's founder. She's 26 years old, a first-generation Chinese American, and she's built something that's going to change how we think about technology forever." He read from the screen. "Marcus, whatever happens in that meeting today, thank you for believing in us when no one else would. You saw what we could become before we even knew it ourselves. Victoria set down the papers, her steel gray eyes now studying Marcus with a different kind of intensity. These numbers, they're verified? Every single one, Marcus replied. Audited by 3 independent firms. I can have the full documentation to you within the hour. The energy in the room had completely transformed. What started as a dismissive interrogation had become something else entirely, a masterclass in leadership, vision, and the power of authentic conviction. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed it to the table. This is a text I received this morning from Sarah Chen, TechFlow's founder. She's 26 years old, a first-generation Chinese American, and she's built something that's going to change how we think about technology forever. He read from the screen. Marcus, whatever happens in that meeting today, thank you for believing in us when no one else would. You saw what we could become before we even knew it ourselves. Victoria's expression had completely changed. The calculating coldness was gone, replaced by something Marcus rarely saw in boardrooms, genuine respect. Mr. Rodriguez, she said quietly, I owe you an apology. No, Marcus replied, shaking his head. You don't owe me anything. But you do owe it to yourself and to your investors to think about what you might be missing when you make assumptions about what success looks like. He gathered his papers and placed them in a neat stack on the table. I've been building companies for 23 years. I've learned that the best investments aren't the ones that look safe. They're the ones that challenge you to see the world differently. The youngest partner at the table, a woman who had been silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. Mr. Rodriguez, what would you need from us to move forward with this acquisition? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since entering the room, it was a smile of genuine warmth rather than professional courtesy. I'd need you to trust that sometimes the best CEOs are the ones who don't look like CEOs. Victoria stood up, her movement causing the others to follow suit. As she walked around the table toward Marcus, her footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet room. 27 years ago, she said, her voice softer than it had been all morning. I was the only woman in rooms like this. Do you know what they used to say to me? Marcus waited. They said I didn't look like a CEO either. She extended her hand toward him. I should have known better. As they shook hands, Marcus felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about one deal or one company. This was about changing the conversation, shifting the paradigm, proving that leadership comes in all colors, genders, and backgrounds. The TechFlow acquisition, she continued, we're prepared to offer full backing, $200 million with the potential for additional funding based on performance metrics. Around the table, heads nodded in agreement. The same people who had been checking their phones and suppressing smirks 20 minutes earlier were now leaning forward with genuine interest. But I have one condition, Victoria added. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I want to meet Sarah Chen. I want to hear her story directly, and I want to make sure we're not just investing in a company, we're investing in the future she's building. As the meeting concluded and the partners began filing out, Marcus found himself alone with Victoria by the rain-streaked windows. The storm outside was finally beginning to clear, shafts of sunlight breaking through the clouds. You know, Victoria said, looking out at the city below, I've been doing this for nearly 30 years. I've seen a lot of presentations, met a lot of entrepreneurs, but I've never seen anyone turn a room around like that. Marcus joined her at the window. It wasn't about turning the room around. It was about telling the truth. The truth? That the best opportunities often come disguised as the things that make us uncomfortable. The people who don't fit the mold, the ideas that seem too different, the companies that challenge our assumptions about how business should work. Victoria nodded slowly. You're going to change how we do business here, aren't you? I hope so, because the world is changing whether we're ready or not. We can either adapt and thrive, or we can stick to our old assumptions and watch opportunities pass us by. As they stood there in the fading afternoon light, Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from Sarah Chen. How did it go? He smiled as he typed back, better than expected. Get ready to change the world. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same boardroom, but everything had changed. The walls now displayed photos of TechFlow's diverse team alongside traditional corporate portraits. The quarterly reports showed record-breaking returns, and most importantly, the conversation had shifted. Victoria had become one of the industry's most vocal advocates for diverse leadership. She'd started a mentorship program for underrepresented entrepreneurs and had completely overhauled Hartwell & Associates' investment criteria. The TechFlow acquisition, she announced to the room full of partners, has returned 340% in 6 months, but more than that, it's opened doors to opportunities we never would have seen before. She gestured to Marcus, who was now a senior advisor to the firm. Marcus taught us that when we change our definition of what leadership looks like, we don't just make better investments, we make better choices about our own future. The room erupted in applause, but Marcus was thinking about something else entirely. He was thinking about a 20-year-old kid with a dream and empty pockets, sitting in a studio apartment with nothing but a laptop and determination. That kid had been told he didn't look like a CEO. Today, he was helping to redefine what CEOs could look like. As the meeting ended and the partners dispersed, Marcus found himself once again by the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sparkled below, full of dreamers and builders, strivers and visionaries who might not look like traditional leaders, but who carried within them the power to transform the world. His phone buzzed with a message from a young entrepreneur he'd been mentoring. "They said I don't look like a CEO. What should I do?" Marcus smiled as he typed back, "Show them what a CEO can look like." Because that's what this was really about, not just proving the doubters wrong, but expanding the definition of what was possible. Not just breaking down barriers, but building bridges to a future where leadership was measured not by how you looked, but by how you led. The rain had stopped completely now, and the sun was breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows across the boardroom floor. In those shadows, Marcus could see the future taking shape, a future where "you don't look like a CEO" would become "you look like exactly the kind of CEO we need." And in that moment, standing 42 floors above the city he'd conquered not through privilege or connections, but through persistence and vision, Marcus Rodriguez knew that the best comeback wasn't just proving people wrong, it was proving them irrelevant. Have you ever been told you don't look like you belong somewhere? Drop a comment and share your story, because sometimes the people who don't fit the mold are exactly the ones who can break it. And if this story inspired you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that their different is their strength. Moral takeaway: true leadership isn't about fitting into someone else's definition of what a leader should look like. It's about having the courage to redefine leadership itself, turning your differences into your greatest strengths, and proving that the future belongs to those brave enough to look different from the past. But Marcus's story was just the beginning. Wait until you hear what happened when Sarah Chan walked into her first board meeting as the youngest CEO in TechFlow's history. What she said left everyone speechless.